Hey, welcome to the Make Your Money Matter Show. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. I'm also managing director and partner here at One Capital Management. Today on the show, we're going to talk about why Treasury bills are a good option for your investment portfolio. A couple weeks ago, we spoke on our show around the 5 areas to place your cash other than just your bank account, and I will refer back to that video. But we got a lot of comments and questions specifically on Treasury bills, which is one of the 5 I mentioned. So I thought today we'd focus a little more specifically as to why a Treasury bill might be a good investment for you. We're going to talk about how to buy a Treasury bill. We'll talk about ultimately how a Treasury bill works. But before we get started on that, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. So first and foremost, remember this. A Treasury bill or a T-bill is backed by the U.S. Department of Treasury, which is why it's considered one of the safest investments. Now, with recent data that I've been speaking about actually around savings rates, is that we've seen our savings rates increase this year across the board in 2023. So this makes a lot of sense to me that we got a lot of comments and questions on this specific investment, because if you're looking at all for a place to store your savings and earn interest in the short term, this might be your route. So with Treasury bills, they have maturity dates, okay? So let's speak to those for a second, right? And they're typically less than a year. They have 6 maturities. They have 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 13 weeks, 17 weeks, 26 weeks, and 52 weeks. So there's flexibility here, as you can see, which is a key advantage. But more interestingly is why I'm bringing it up here really on the show today is that typically in most investments, you'll see that longer term, and treasuries as well, by the way, you'll see that the longer treasuries, the longer term, they'll pay higher yields than say short term. You see that in the bond market just the same. But in this case scenario right now, it's just not that way, right? Right now, the 3-month treasury bill rate is right around 5%, while the 30-year treasury rate is just under 4%. Now, obviously there's a difference between a T-bill, a T-note, and a T-bond, which I'll talk about in a later episode, but it gives you a comparison here to understand. So again, if you're looking for a way to risk-free, invest and earn interest on cash in the short term, I think a T-bill is a great alternative than just stuffing it away in your savings account. So the next question you might be asking with this is, that's great, Brad, but when is it a good investment for me? So specifically for me, I think there's a couple examples. And as an advisor, I brought up here in the past 6-9 months for clients, and that's whether clients are making large purchases in the short term. Maybe it's a home purchase or a second home purchase. Those are great examples of short-term savings to earn interest, why a T-bill might come in handy. Maybe you refinanced your house in the past couple years and you're sitting on cash in that refi because rates are higher now and you're not sure where to deploy it. Again, there's just a few examples of when you want to maybe park cash in an area that, again, you're not locked up into, right? A CD or something like that, you get some high interest, but you're locked up, okay? But a T-bill is a great way to earn higher interest than just your savings account. So how do you buy a Treasury bill? That was one of the questions we actually got, right? So you can do it one of 2 ways. I'm just gonna go, there's actually a couple, but I'm gonna go down 2, right? One is you can buy it directly from the Treasury, all right? Directly from the government through the treasurydirect.gov website. The second is you actually buy it through an advisor or have a brokerage account. We do this here at One Capital Management for our clients. It's actually something we call cash management, and it is very much a part of portfolio management. So now on the Treasury Direct side, to start an account with them, you'll need to provide a U.S. address, social security number, and a bank account. Now afterwards, since T-bills are sold on auction, those looking to invest will actually need to place a bid on the Direct website. So once it's accepted, it'll arrive in your Treasury Direct account if you're using a brokerage account or an advisor, okay? Now, T-bills can also be bought through ETFs and some mutual funds, but I wanna be clear here on this. If you're looking to buy a T-bill for like your IRA or a tax-deferred account, you'll need to go through an advisor or set up a brokerage account, because those accounts cannot actually be done directly through the Treasury Direct. So again, it's a high-level area of how to buy a Treasury bill, but then I wanna focus on how a Treasury bill actually works. Because I think many understanding the how and the why makes a lot of sense into how it's actually come due this year and why it's really been more of a main conversation than it really has been in a long time. Because we in the investment world have known that typically we consider these assets I'm bringing up, like a T-bill, what we call risk-free rates. What does that mean? It's what we compare any investment to. We call this arbitrage, okay? So if we were to say, I have 2 options here with cash, okay? I don't want to take on too much risk, but I also don't want to not earn money, right? We all ask that of ourselves. So that initial question, that initial conversation starts with what we call as a risk-free rate. T-bills, typically 10-year notes, bonds, those kind of things that give us relevance into what we would be considering a risk-free rate versus something that would have more risk. This tells us, friends, if the risk-free rate, for example, years ago was at 3%, as an example, and if you're kind of going like, that's kind of low, I kind of want to earn more than that, but I know that I'll have to step up and take more risk. So it gives you a starting point, all right, if you will. Now, why I'm bringing this up before I get into how a Treasury bill actually works is because it brings up the relevance as to why this is a subject matter right now, as I mentioned, right? Because the risk-free rate is not 3% anymore, friends. It's now upwards of 5%. So now all of a sudden, we're now kind of like, hey, wait a minute. I actually don't have to take on a whole bunch of risk when I can go and get 5% backed by the Treasury. I mean, that's a pretty good solid piece of paper, as we say in our business, right? So I just want to give you some background as to why this has been in the news and in the media, and maybe why we've got the comments, and we've talked about it here on the Make Your Money Matter show, because it's very much a large part of portfolio management as we consider a cash management for our clients. And when you have cash earning the rates that we can see right now, that's very much something we should talk about. But to get into depth here, a Treasury bill, or again, otherwise known as a T-bill, it's a short-term debt obligation. That's specifically what it is. And again, that's backed by the U.S. Treasury Department. So one of the safest places you can save your cash, because again, backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And they're auctioned off, as I mentioned before, right, into how you buy a T-bill. They're auctioned off at a discount and then redeemed at maturity for the full amount. Now, the interest, the quote-unquote interest on a T-bill isn't really just interest like you receive every month, okay? It's what they deem it this way. Is the difference between how much you pay and how much value you get when the bill matures. The most common maturity dates, there were 6 of them, but the most common are 4, 8, 13, 26, and 52 weeks. Those are the most common, all right? There's another one out there, but again, those are the ones that really most people are purchasing. Now, in addition, I want to add this to Treasury bills here. There are Treasury securities to invest in as well. There's Treasury bonds, T-bonds, which do pay a fixed interest rate every 6 months, and those have the longest maturity periods. Those are typically 20 or 30 years. And Treasury notes, they also pay a fixed rate of interest every 6 months, but they have shorter maturity periods than T-bonds that typically range anywhere between 2 and 10 years. So I bring that up simply to say that we don't want to get too confused around a T-note versus a T-bill. And I'm actually going to focus on that here soon as a separate episode in understanding the differences, okay? So stay tuned for that because I think it is important. And I think a lot of us, I've seen the vernacular almost sometimes be misused. So I spoke about this recently actually, where misconceptions or how we misuse information, right, especially in the financial world, can actually have really big consequences. So we want to be sure that just because we heard it here on our show or heard it from a friend or an advisor or on the news or whatever it might be, right? Because again, T-bills, T-bonds, T-notes, very different how they actually interact with your overall investment philosophy and the goals you're trying to obtain. Now, if you're trying to look at cash management, and I'll say it, this as well, when you go back to how to buy a T-bill, I want to focus on this because I do think that it's probably wise that you work with an advisor, okay? As I mentioned, a lot of many different reasons, whether it's planning oriented, whether it's investment oriented, but really, I think that it's wise to go through an advisor for a T-bill because there's actually a lot of management that comes with it, all right? It doesn't seem like it, but there is. Because if you have an interest rate market that's moving around, right? If you're in the shorter term maturity in a T-bill, like let's say the 1 month, for example, and let's say rates move, right? You wanna make sure you're able to move right after that rate and get the higher rate. So there's some management inside there to also advise on how long to go and how short to go, right? Because when you're looking at rates, again, you wanna make sure you don't get too locked up for too long and vice versa, okay? You wanna make sure you get into the higher rates as soon as you can so you keep it short and understand what's going on in the economy. So there is some management that comes with it. And again, an advisor can really help you with that. And I think it's really important as you look at the 2 ways of how to buy a T-bill. But I do hope you enjoyed that today. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our show so you don't miss a single episode. And always remember to make your money matter.